Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. Can you imagine if I started my videos like that? That would be awful. That would be terrible. What's going on, everybody? My name is Kieran, and I like helping people using my spiritual perspective. Using my spiritual perspective? Using a spiritual perspective, anyway. I'm here to talk about something. Do you guys know what I'm here to talk about? You wouldn't, would you? No, I'm here to talk about expectations. Like, for instance, maybe you had an expectation that watching this video would be helpful, and now you're like, what's wrong with this kid in his pink shirt? And then you inevitably go watch Downton Abbey highlights. But for the rest of you who stuck around and didn't have expectations, you might get something out of this video. And you might get something out of life by not having expectations. Because we live in a world, or a society in a world, that almost highlights, accepts, praises the idea of expectations. I don't know if we call it expectations, but certainly the paths that have been laid down before us have been seeded with the soil of expectations. What an awful metaphor. What I'm trying to say, everybody, is that there's paths for us that have been designated, often. Okay? Our family sets us paths, certain ways that we should be, certain ways that society feels, the media, friends, others around you, politics. Okay, there's lots of expectations. Let's name a popular one. Of course, being heterosexual, that's a sort of an expectation. Going to college after high school, expectation. Just following a traditional standard route, expectation. Going after certain types of people, expectation. Certain types of jobs, expectation. We have lots of expectations that are already ingrained within us, and society seems to want this to be the case. So we live already unconsciously with a lot of expectations about the way that life should look. And because so many of us, regardless of how spiritual we believe we are, associate life with something very disconnected from ourselves, we suffer because our expectations are not being met, even though those expectations are not necessarily our own. So there's already this initial benefit from removing ourselves from expectations. And that is the idea that our expectations are probably 99% chance not our own expectations, meaning we wouldn't have come up with them ourselves consciously if we could have. They were ingrained into us, right? And expectations are the destruction of my life. They are the destruction of my life. I will absolutely, more than anything, more than drugs, that didn't destroy my life like expectations did, I'll be honest with you. More than any heartbreak, more than any injury, more than any emotional thing, expectations were the biggest obstacle in my life, probably still is, right? It's this, in many people's lives, I mean, all of the symptoms of the things that we do are almost a result of our expectations for ourselves and the way life should pan out. And of course, our expectations of others, which is still an expectation of ourselves. Because if others aren't acting according to our expectations, that's the issue, right? Our expectations, not others' expectations. And we do this in two ways, consciously and unconsciously. Consciously is pretty easy to understand. It's something that you're aware of doing. You know, you expect something to go well and it doesn't, so you're disappointed, right? It's anything from, oh, this movie is going to be great, the trailers look so good, and then it turns out to be awful, right? It happens all the time. It's just a small, silly example, but one easily recognizable. Unconscious is patterns that we're not fully aware of, that we've been doing maybe our whole life or maybe just for a while. And this could be things like the types of jobs that we go after. We expect ourselves to get these jobs, to do well in these jobs, and we don't. So for my own life, you know, I was never happy with most of the work that I was doing in my life. It was always food, retail, sales, some combination of all three maybe, some odd jobs sometimes, but I always expected myself, you know, to do well in them, not like I ever wanted to become like the head manager of a Macy's, but I would work hard. I'm a hard worker. I'm not a very good employee, but I'm a hard worker. And I was always disappointed in those jobs because I couldn't last. I couldn't do it. Others around me seemed to have a good time. Their attitudes maybe kept some sort of neutral positivity about them, but I would always find myself just being very negative after a while and unable to cope. And I would either always quit, usually without 2 weeks warning, or I would get fired. I got fired one time for calling a girl a cunt. You may think that that's quite rude. In my defense, she was a cunt, and I was on drugs. Both of those things didn't add up very well, but that's a different story for a different day. That'll be in my new podcast called Times I Said the Word Cunt. But for now, we'll just focus on the fact that I was led to do many different things that I thought I should have done. Meaning it's not like these jobs were ever to make me happy. I've worked at pizza places, restaurants, went door to door one time, or, like trying to sell something. What was I trying to sell? Panels, roof stuff? I don't know. That was a weird summer. Times where I worked at sales, like telephone, cold calling stuff, and it didn't work. I never was able to really make that much money. They keep you in sort of these prisons, these traps, and it sucked. It sucked regardless of how I want to, paraphrase it. But that was the jobs that I thought that I had to do. That was my expectation. It was unconscious. I believed that those were the jobs that were available to me, so I had expectations of those jobs, and they always disappointed me. And then, over the past 3 years, basically as long as I have been spiritually awakened, going through a spiritual journey, and I hate saying that now, being spiritually awakened, because it must sound, to people who aren't spiritually awakened, it must sound like I think I'm some sort of person, somebody important, somebody on a different level. Maybe I am to some degree, but I hate the sound of it these days because I don't want it to make it seem like I'm some guru or something. I'm not. I'm just a regular person with a perspective. But anyway, since I've been spiritually awakened, I have not been able to do those jobs effectively, especially the last few years. And I often haven't been able to get them, regardless of how broke or absolutely confused or like in need of a job I was. I would not be able to get these things. I have great interviews, second, third interviews, but no matter what, I still couldn't get the jobs. So I was still disappointed. I had these expectations that were unconscious, right? So we can do that in love a lot too. And one of the biggest things that I think a counter-argument to this is that, well, of course, when we look at love, shouldn't there be expectations in love? I expect communication and a healthy relationship. So if that's not being met, why would I stay? Should I just have no expectations and just accept that? It seems like a logical counter-argument. And that is a logical argument, certainly, but it's not the type of counter-argument that we would be talking about here. Because I'm talking about the expectations that we have about ourselves and about life. If you expect, for instance, this person to have good communication skills and then you're disappointed and you keep trying and you keep getting disappointed and your expectations aren't helping. So your expectations of good communication in a partnership is different altogether than what your self-worth is. Those are two different things. You can still have self-worth and not have expectations, right? So if you don't have expectations, then a partner who's not meeting your criteria, your needs and your wants in a relationship is automatic. You would automatically recognize it without the mental maze and obstacles of a expectation. So no, you don't need to abandon your self-worth and just accept anything just because you can. Or you should. No, not at all, right? That's terrible. That's actually codependency. But expectations are setting guidelines, your mind coming up with plans, and they often fail. They often just fail. They just make you miserable. It takes the joy out of your life, having an expectation for how everything should go, and it blocks you because it creates this desperate feeling. You try to make the girl like you. The girl doesn't like you. You try harder to make the girl like you. The girl doesn't like you. This is, of course, true for the opposite sex, right? The boy doesn't like you. You try harder to make the boy like you. The boy doesn't like you. It doesn't matter if you're charming, funny, hot, sexy, you got a nice pair of breasts or a big penis or something. It doesn't matter if you're in shape, out of shape, tall, short, nice hair, frizzy hair, no hair. It doesn't matter. There's something for everybody and someone for everybody. Most people, maybe. But generally speaking, there is opportunities for lots of people in different ways. And our expectations are often not in alignment with what would be good for us. So we try to make the specific person with the specific face and the specific body and their human self, we try to make them fit. We try to make jobs fit. We try to make situations fit. We try to make ourselves fit into a narrative as well. I should be enlightened. I should be farther ahead than I am now. But that creates the suffering. I should be farther ahead than I am now. There's your expectation. And it's something we all do, me especially. You're on a spiritual journey. You recognize so much truth. You're doing things that are good for your spiritual health, maybe even your physical, mental health. But you should be farther ahead. That idea, that expectation creates the suffering. You're here doing what you can, but that's not good enough. You should be over there. So if you shouldn't be here, say the frame of this video, let's call it the present moment, and instead you should be off camera somewhere else, then everything here doesn't matter. You suck now. Now you're suffering. The expectation. You shouldn't be here, you should be there. And this is what happens in relationships. This shouldn't be happening. Something else should be happening. Same thing with jobs. This shouldn't be my job. This shouldn't be what I'm experiencing. All this should be happening. Maybe, maybe not, right? I'm not God. Maybe you should be farther ahead. But I doubt it. I sincerely doubt that you should be anywhere but where you are, because going farther ahead is a natural process that would happen a lot quicker if you didn't think that you weren't okay right now. The expectations ruin our lives. Take me, for example, the pasty white person before you. I've been disappointed in love like 100,000 times. Nobody's fault. Well, my fault, but nobody's fault. I've been disappointed in career. It's because I never really did what I wanted to. I've been disappointed in basic stuff, basic life of how it should go. Should I be smarter, happier, healthier, more in shape, better looking, smarter? Did I already say that? Maybe I should have a better memory too. And all the above and everything you could think of. I should this, and this, and this. And the expectations that come up are just hilarious when you look at them in retrospect. I mean, I look at these things that I've told myself, that I've done, that I've tried, and they just fail all the time. All the time. And when they don't fail, so the times they don't fail, you're not really happy because maybe it wasn't really that great. You thought it would be so cool. Not that big of a deal, actually, in the long run, or it sucks the joy out of it, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like I had this crush on a girl one time at a job, and I was infatuated with her, and then I finally asked her out, and she was boring. This was years ago, but I just didn't like the relationship. It sucked, actually, and it didn't last very long, 5 months maybe. Anyway, so this was a small example of expectations. And I think to myself, like, all the ways in which I still try to come up with an expectation. And it's like, well, this should go like this. And if I do this, this will happen, right? There's a big expectation that so many of us do. And this is this ingrained mental belief is if I want this to happen, X maybe, then I should do this. And that's where the expectation falls flat oftentimes, especially if you're going through a spiritual journey. Because what that means if you're going through a spiritual awakening, if you're spiritual of some kind, is that you care about growth and you care about the deeper things in life, which means that you as an individual cannot continuously do the same thing because you would be meant to do greater things than what you're used to, maybe what your peers are used to. And so the expectations that you grew up with are not going to serve you. And so if there was ever an expectation to be had, it would be that there should be no expectations, if you could even say that, if that even made sense. So the expectations that you come up with, again, I should do something and this will work out. I should take these steps. And then there's a plan, there's a goal. The mind says, we'll do these things and then this will happen. But it doesn't happen. Oftentimes it doesn't happen. Oftentimes you're left feeling alone, depressed, sad, disappointed, of course, because of the expectation. And, afraid that you're a failure and a fraud, and that nothing you do will actually help. So many times in my life have I come to that understanding and watched myself go through the process of thinking I want something, having an expectation about what it would make me feel, taking steps, regardless of if they work or don't work anymore, and then being disappointed that ultimately it failed. It's happened time and time again. It happens recently. It will probably happen again unless I can change. But there's the expectation again. Unless I can change. If only I was different. I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. That these are the things we tell ourselves. If only I was different. If only I could change. If only I was stronger, had more courage, smarter, wiser. If only I could face my emotions. If only I was more successful. If only I had more money. If only I was better looking. All these things, these expectations of what we think would bring us a feeling of peace. We think it's happiness, but we want peace. We want the feeling of not caring anymore. And that's what peace is. Peace is not caring. But everybody wants that feeling. Everybody wants the feeling of just existing in the present moment, not worrying about shit. That's not happiness. That's peace. And that feeling cannot come with an expectation. It is impossible. It's trying to relax is impossible. Can you relax? Can you try to relax? No. You either relax or you don't. There is no try. Trying is the opposite of relaxing. You're making an effort. That's not relaxing. But it's a paradox, because to relax means to instantly do something. But again, the mind creates a narrative. It's like trying to fall asleep. You either fall asleep or you don't. Trying to fall asleep just keeps you in a limbo state of frustration. That's what causes the frustration. If you can't sleep, stay up and do whatever it is you wanted to do and get that out of the way. And if you want to sleep, go to sleep. But the trying is the expectations, right? I have an expectation that I should get 9 hours of sleep every night. And then every night you only get 6 because the 2 you keep wasting trying. The expectations are what is harming us. Can we live in a world with no expectations? Can we live with ourselves? Forget about the world. Can we live with ourselves with no expectations? What would that look like? What would it look like to not give a shit? Right? What would it look like to not give a shit? What would it feel like? We probably have plenty of examples of what it would feel like to not give a shit anymore. Of our lives when we did feel like that. And there would have been no expectations. Last time I felt peace, genuine peace, was when there wasn't an expectation. I felt some peace last night. I was sitting outside looking at the stars. And I didn't go out there for any specific reason to look at the stars. The nights that I go out to look at the stars because I think it'll make me feel peaceful, does it make me feel peaceful? No, it doesn't make me feel peaceful at all. It makes me have an expectation of this is how it should go, and then it doesn't work. But last night I was just staring, and everything looked different at night. I started to really, obviously, but I started to appreciate the trees looked like cotton candy. It was just so weird, and it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful night. And anyway, I felt at least 15 minutes of peace because there's just nothing else there, you know what I mean? And remove all the expectations that you have during your day. Think about it. Think about how many expectations. I should get this parking spot. The law of attraction, manifestation should work for me like this. This is how my spiritual journey should go. The thoughts you have about yourself, your relationships with others, the random things throughout the day. How many expectations do you really have about how your day should go? Seriously. And then judge yourself accordingly by how you end up feeling by the end of the day. chances are you'll feel like you still didn't do enough, or you wasted it, or regardless of what happened, you still feel kind of shitty about yourself. This is what happens when we let expectations guide our lives rather than peace, rather than just feeling all right, just being all right with who you are, you know? Sorry, someone's calling me. So these things are helpful to think about. We don't want these expectations to make our lives worse. We don't want them to cause suffering, because the expectations do cause suffering for ourselves. We don't want that. So, in my life, I am trying to embrace this unknown, no expectations. I'm in a spot right now where it's like, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to be, not exactly sure where I should be, not exactly, will I be able to stay in California? Maybe not. Will I end up in Oregon? Will I end up back in Canada? Will I go somewhere else? What will happen? All I know for certain is that expectations of what is best for me, what I should do, has never effectively worked. It just hasn't. And it won't in the future. So for me, I'm going to embrace more peace. And I hope you guys can do the same. Anyway, this was a video. I hope it helped you guys. I hope you guys have a good week. Try to get a video sooner than later. Probably won't be for a while, at least a couple weeks. Need some rest, I think. But I'm not going to have an expectation about it. So I'll see you when I see you guys. Have a good one.